In the modern mining landscape, the intersection between learning technologies and strict regulations has never been more pertinent. As skills development and compliance demands are equally pressing, the global mining sector is projected to invest over $2 billion in digital transformation by 2025. With compliance demands being a top priority in such high-risk environments, the need for a balanced and future-minded approach is clear. Exploring these dynamics with us today and more is Natascha, Meyer and Mark Sivewright. Welcome to the show, guys.
Yes.
It's awesome to have you on. So now, you two are a dynamic duo. You're both working in the mining space. Mark, you're coming from the technical side. Natascha, you're coming from the strategic and content side. Tell us about how your team dynamic works and where you guys started within this space from Win-Win.
Sure. So Natascha, when did you join?
So I've been in this company for 3 years. My background is pure consulting. So that is why my true passion is actually strategic and processes. And I've always dabbled in the content space and had a keen interest in terms of multimedia and learning journeys and learning strategies. And I really feel that that's often a piece that is missed when companies decide to purchase learning management systems. And we're seeing it more and more in the mining space.
Yeah, it's almost like a checkbox exercise. So you came from Accenture, right?
That's correct.
We started off from a Win-Win perspective. Sure, it must have been 2013.
Yeah.
I think Stu, the CEO, he was on a plane ride from Dubai or something like that, and he ended up sitting next to the CEO of Vedanta, South Africa.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, hold on. Completely wrong. It was the learning specialist at Anglo Platinum.
Yeah.
Is where it started. And they started having a conversation, and we went in, must have been about 2 or 3 months later, to rebuild the entire induction process from end to end, from a content perspective, and digitize that. And we built this platform, this like one-off platform that was just dedicated to induction, and we put that on all the computers inside of their computer centers, and that's really how we got into mining. Before that, I would say we really had very little mining presence as a business, and really just from a conversation in a plane with someone that was in the mining space, we started this journey. And yeah, I've really enjoyed it. You know, I focus more on the platform side of things, so trying to develop good user experiences for these miners. I think they often get thrown into the deep end when it comes to platforms. They get thrown into this computer center and get told, do your induction or do this learning, and they are often overlooked when it comes to user experience, when it comes to actually delivering something that is going to help them and save them time. So that's really where we play. That's where we started. That's what we do now. We are a technology business in some sense, as well as a strategy and learning business.
So over these last few years, you've seen it change. You've seen learning in mining change from where it was, what you've just framed now, to where it is today. Tell me, how have we gotten from there to here, and where is here?
So I think from my point of view, learning mining organizations are looking at learning more strategically. They have to. So there are questions that need to be answered around compliance, return on investment, skills levy rebates. So they're starting to look towards ticking those boxes, to making sure that they achieve those strategic deliverables. But at the same time, they still have to make sure that there's clear induction done, that zero harm is, we measure that we make sure that we are saving lives. So there's a shift in terms of not only making sure that the platform that is selected enables this, but also that it, as Mark said, the user experience is great. And the other buzzword that's obviously in the industry at the moment is adoption, because I don't think that was ever measured.
Right.
So from a data point of view, which Mark can speak to a lot more than I can, there's more focus on data, the quality of data, the quality of processes, and more we're using learning management systems to enable the end-to-end process, right from a data point of view, from a scheduling point of view, right through to the printing of permits and the reporting.
So you framed it from the data perspective. Mark, how do you leverage data and analytics from the LMS to provide actionable insights for the mines and HR teams?
Yeah, so there's a number of I would say touch points in a mine. We obviously talking about a learning platform. That's really one component of a mine. And if you look at HR in general, there's many different touch points and components in HR, and then it all stretches across. But when you're looking at data and you're trying to understand what data can do in the mining space, you really need to see how all those various touch points from learning all the way through to actually operating a machine can filter through into something that's reportable. There are a number of things that a mine would need to report on. So you've got your triple BE requirements that need to be reported on, the engagements that the mine has with the community around them.
Yeah.
And in South Africa, there's a big dynamic there.
Absolutely.
And then all the way through to mining, actually mining, using equipment, using a driller, using a LDV, operating these machines. If you don't have accurate data, if you don't have that data and all those touch points in that data collected and reportable, you can end up having a situation where someone is operating a high-risk machine or doing high-risk work in the mining space. They don't have authorization to do that. Something may end up happening, and then there's investigations. So data becomes crucial from a productivity perspective and from a compliance perspective. There's huge risks in a mine if something goes wrong and you can't get the information for...
I mean, there's massive value to that data, and that's a huge part of their ROI when they're investing in these, digital implementations of learning and compliance. Being able to check in and see where on-site workers are. Have they done this training? Have they done it regularly? How regularly? How has it been impacting them? From a user experience point of view, how is it different for mines versus, let's say, other working sectors? Like, what are my concern as an on-site worker, or what is my concern as an on-site manager?
So I think from a learning point of view, if I may take that steer first, from a content point of view, is it's critical that we understand the user. Every mine is moving towards creating an environment of continuous learning. That's the buzzword.
Right.
Okay. And you'll read it on every strategy document. You'll read it on every learning strategy document. But in mining, that's far more challenging because here we have a miner who's at the coalface. We need to look at the level of education and the types of learning interventions that we can actually offer. We need to then understand that you've got your executives who are sitting in an environment that they have access to Wi-Fi and computers, and therefore they can learn directly on a computer.
Right.
So I think for me, before we jump into, more of a platform side, it's how do we build this user experience?
Yeah.
Okay. And how does this user experience work for the individual, if you wish, categories of learners, and what do we need to take into consideration? And when they start to use a platform, how does that work? Is that blend a combination of classroom and digital, or is it classroom-based? Now, I know, Mark, if you wouldn't mind talking to how we actually sometimes work from how we manage and track classroom-based learning, but how does the assessment work? Is it an on-job assessment? Is it a classroom-based assessment? And how is that data also pulling through? And then also in terms of we're exposing learners to different types of learning content. Is it great? Is it fantastic visually? And does it meet their language requirements? Platforms should also enable the push in terms of learning journeys.
Yeah.
To sort of say that this is the next module that you need to go through. But how does that then work when you have a miner who's actually working at the coalface, who probably needs a blended approach rather than a pure digital approach?
Because you're interacting with people at different skills levels, different literacies, different cultural backgrounds, different kind of educational backgrounds. Now, how do you meet all those needs in one sweep, one solution?
That's definitely the way in which we look to building content. We really need to understand that user and do that user analysis.
So how do you do that user analysis?
So it's a lot of engagement. It's engagement on the mine, understanding a lot of interactions with people who can give us information, SMEs. So if we're developing a certain product, who are the users? What is their level of competency? And what is that blend that we need to accommodate? And maybe the blend actually ticks all those boxes based on your individual. So maybe it is built for the miner who actually has a meeting once a week with their manager, and we work from a poster campaign and we record the assessment on the platform, or a full-on digital solution for an executive. So it's really about a strong analysis piece that needs to be done before that happens. Then our platform comes in, and it needs to make sure that the platform that's been selected as part of the strategy drives that learning, drives and tracks and monitors and enables, so that our learner, no matter what level, doesn't feel intimidated. The advantages of digital assessments, where we're assessing you while you're doing the job, on the job. The drive in terms of a badge or a certificate. You will not believe in mining how valuable a certificate is that can be printed off, that can be shown.
I can imagine that, yeah.
From a sense of completion. And these are the things that actually, when we talk user experience, we need to also think about adoption. And that is a key ROI measurement, is the adoption of this learning platform. Absolutely. And the change management that goes around that.
So can you share any specific examples where a training intervention led to measurable improvements in safety outcomes and learner adoption?
So I'm thinking of a particular program that we did for Papia, for one of the mines.
Yeah.
So we actually looked at the users and categorized them based on their sort of demographics, if you wish. And I mean that with every sensitivity. And we realized that even the miners at the coalface needed to understand Papia. So we contextualized the content.
Yeah.
So we took a legal act, rewrote the content, and developed it in such a way that it became an engagement of content.
Because if I'm a miner and I'm going through massive legal documents, there's going to be no retention from that. There's going to be nothing. I mean, I've probably not come across this before, or if I have, I've come across it so much that it actually is just falling on deaf ears now. You need to see that not only are people regularly engaging in this, but that it is effective. Because, I mean, if something goes wrong in a mine context, you know, it's not just, slap on the wrist. People can get injured. The mine could shut down for a day, and this is what a regular problem is. It shows how important the implementation of learning and development is.
Yeah, you know, if you get the user experience wrong, there are definitely knock-on effects.
Yeah.
If I think of a project that we did with Exaro, it was in partnership with Accenture actually. We did this induction program for Exaro. The first thing that brings immediate return is the time spent in the classroom.
Yes.
Right? So if I need to train a individual, I need to take them out of the production environment, out of the creation of money for the business, into a classroom where they need to be trained. We took an induction program that was 7 days long. So they would sit in the classroom for 7 days. That's 7 days of production for that person gone. And we condensed it down into, I think it was about a half a day program.
Yeah.
Where they went through all the same training content in half a day. The only way you can do that is by looking at the user experience. The only reason it took 7 days was the training material that they were going through was not catered and designed and tailored to the needs of the person that was going through the training. The second thing in the return on investment is, as you mentioned, is if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So all of your training content in the mining environment, or not all of it, but a lot of it is linked to what's called a unit standard.
Right.
So there's certain things that need to be trained on. And you have to train on those things.
Now, is that set at a government level? Is that set at a mining organizational level? Where are these points set?
At SACWA, at a
government level. Yeah. So let's say the government says you need to do training on hand safety.
Yeah.
Or your induction training needs to follow these certain standards. It would be a blend of government and business. So the business has certain procedures in place. The government has things that that need to be in place from a training perspective. And the mines work together with the government. But when it comes to the training, if you can hit all those same touch points and assess that individual on all of those unit standards, but deliver the content to them in a way that is understandable, that they can interpret in their own language, that when it gets to the point where they need to be assessed on that training content, they've got all of that information. So taking a 7-day program, condensing it into a half a day is a huge return on investment. And then on top of that, it's if something goes wrong, we can prove to you that this individual passed on the first attempt. It didn't take them 3 attempts. We didn't just reissue these assessments to them. They understood the training content, and it is essentially it relates to safety in the mine. You know, the person understanding that information, understanding that content, tends to act in a safer manner when they're operating machines, when they operating or doing their jobs in the actual mining environment.
I think it's important for mines to see that this is something that is being done across multiple businesses, multiple mines within the mining sector. How do we ensure that this blueprint for this program, or these programs that we're operating on, are scalable, adaptable, and applicable across different circumstances?
I think it's our engagement model.
Right.
We're very hands-on from an organization. So whoever the implementation partners are that you select, an organization selects, they need to ensure that they first of all understand mining, but also understand the end-to-end process. So, for example, it's not just about the data. It's what happens to the data. Do we need to integrate with other environments? Often we work with mines who are, for example, Oracle or SAP houses. The user information. How do we create that technical pull-through in terms of all of the systems that are impacted on in the actual mine itself? So our approach is to spend a lot of time not only looking at it from the bucket of content, and this is our learning management system, but saying, how do we integrate this into the environment so that it actually takes data from, user data from, that the data in our platform is current?
Right.
How do we deal with historical data? And then also, can we ensure that when our miner goes to the gate and, activates the security access, that the gate opens, making sure that they're actually accredited to come through onto the mine. So it's bigger than. So any organization that's looking for a learning management system needs to think bigger than just we're purchasing a learning management system. They need to understand the end-to-end process of what they're wanting to achieve, and it needs to be a holistic solution. The content, yes, needs to make sure that we're teaching certain skills, that we're creating a culture of continuous learning. But if we don't have those larger puzzle pieces in place, it's just another platform. I know, absolutely. And I mean another platform in the environment. Because this is what we're finding is that as we look at this more holistically, organizations are starting to decommission platforms that have been bought by smaller operational areas within a mine, decommissioning that, and it's actually generating a cost savings for them. So it's about looking at the end-to-end process, what you want to achieve strategically. Then the learning stuff comes.
Because it's such a buzzword in our industry, integration, right? It's often thrown around, and it's something that doesn't always apply. In this case, we're talking about multiple systems being used in mines, HR platforms, a whole bunch of other things. Now, what you're offering, essentially, as a team is being able to take a learning solution and make it integratable to other systems. Now, explain why that's a concern. Besides the fact of redundancies of multiple programs, why is it important for things to be able to plug in together?
Yeah, maybe I can answer that. So, again, number one, I personally believe is the accuracy of data across all of these different platforms. When you leave things unintegrated, you open up the opportunity for data to become stagnant in one or multiple systems. When data becomes stagnant, the usefulness of that platform slowly starts to degrade over time. So firstly, when you integrate, you maintain a level of consistency across multiple platforms. The second thing is really cost saving. Number one, if you're unintegrated, let's say from a HR perspective, we're not integrating into a SAP system and we're not pulling people data automatically into a learning system. An administrator needs to do that.
Yeah.
An administrator will need to download a CSV document or an Excel document and manually create those records in a separate platform. With that, you're wasting someone's time, essentially.
Totally.
You can automate that completely. And then from a cost-saving perspective, it's also, with the mines, you do a lot of access control.
Yeah.
Right? So I can't come into this area unless I've got my induction, I've got my licensing. I can't operate certain machinery unless I've got all of that certification. If a control room, access control room needs to verify certificates every time, so someone needs to come with their certificate, here's my certificate of completion, that takes time. When you integrate, it's a matter of putting my fingerprint on the scanner, it checks whether or not you're certified to be here, and the gate opens. That saves a lot of time and energy from a control room perspective and from a miner perspective.
That must have quite a direct impact on the number of incidents and the reduction of those incidents.
Yeah, I think from an incidents perspective, there's a lot of compliance and checkboxing that happens in the mining space. That's really where Natascha comes in to say it's not really only about ticking the box.
Yeah.
That I did my training on hand safety, I did my training on X, Y, and Z, whatever it was. It's, did I understand what I was doing when I went through that training? That has a real impact on incidents that happen. I personally believe it's not about ticking the boxes, but when it comes to compliance, the integrations do play a role. It does play a role. Someone who hasn't been trained on something will not be able to access and perform certain tasks in the mining space, and there's no way of working around that.
Yeah.
Because it's a system talking to a system. There's no loopholes. There's no jumping over the bridge. It's one process across all the operations, and we can monitor and maintain that with automations and integration.
So from a mining point of view,
Yeah.
that is often, this solution is often a long journey.
All right.
So a lot of the documentation that sits in the mines is in PDF format, so Word or PowerPoint documents. Digital assessments is a new thing.
Yeah.
So the transition and walking the journey with the client is critical.
Yeah.
So your implementation partner really needs to be part of your project. It's not, we work with our implementation partners. We work with the operational managers, with SMEs within the mines.
Very sticky.
It is. And we become one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of discussions, and, the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of all of that. But at the end of the day, if it's done properly, if the analysis is done properly, and the process is in place in true analytical format, you will achieve the right results. It's not something you can do airy-fairy.
Yeah.
It needs to be structured.
Yeah.
And we work with the teams. We engage on a daily basis. We have multiple smaller projects that we work with. We've got content projects. We've got data projects. There are a lot of different projects running. And an integration can take, up to a year, depending on how complex an organization, a mining company is.
Okay, so let's pretend for an instance that I am an HR director at one of these mines, right? I've approached you and I said, listen, a lot of mine learning is still paper-based. We've now made a lot of digital documentation versions of these things. Tell me, in terms of my pathway forwards, where am I looking at going, and how can I invest my time and resources here, looking even further into the future? Where are we going?
So I think from a first stab, it's to understand, what does that strategy look like? What are you trying to achieve? And more importantly, with the end in mind, how are you going to measure it? Okay, so once we understand how we're measuring it, and what the key measurements from an organization point of view is, we can then say, right, strategy is A, B, and C. We can identify what we have, and from there, what needs to be developed in terms of content. So maybe in some cases, a word-based procedure is sufficient.
Right.
we need to look at how much money is going to be invested in this as well. And what are the quick wins that actually will achieve the results that you're looking for from your return on investment. And then more importantly is who's going to monitor and maintain this?
Yeah.
Okay, so often a learning management system is dumped into an organization and nobody's upskilled from an administration point of view. We work hand in hand with the administrators to make sure they are totally empowered to run the platform for each of their operations.
All right.
So training is critical. Training is critical, and then ongoing in terms of that is what is the support that they will get from a platform point of view.
So tell me, both of you, how important will technological innovations be in this space? Currently now, there's new trends. I don't know if they're being implemented in the mining world or not. I don't know how many years we are away from that, or even months. Are they being implemented now? How is this going to impact me?
So it's a good question. And I think oftentimes we can think, especially when we're talking at a strategic level, we can think very broadly and not look at the practicals.
Yeah.
So an example would be an SOP that needs to be trained in a mine. There are thousands of them, and they get updated every year. Now this is training content, right? So usually it's a Word document, and the reason it's a Word document is quite practical, because next year I need to update this document with the new procedures, and then the following year I need to update it again. I need to update the assessments. So when it comes to building that type of training in this really engaging a course, it makes it very expensive and very complicated to keep up with the unit standard. So Word document works. The changes or the things that I would see from a trends perspective is definitely in the AI space. How can I get a piece of content into an existing course that is dynamic, that is beautifully crafted, that looks amazing, and that hits all of our needs when it comes to user experience? How do I update that every single year and not have this huge cost for the update? AI is something that would definitely play a huge role in updating that type of content.
It's going to be a massive efficiency tool.
100%.
Is this something that's currently being implemented in the industry?
So we're exploring it with our platform. We're looking at how we can use tools like large language models to assist your administrators with building of assessments, building of your curriculum within the mine. But when I look at the landscape at the moment, especially in South Africa, what we see more often than not is really old systems. Systems that are 15, 20 years old. And that's LMS and HCM systems. Very, very old. Oftentimes the platforms they're using are an old version of a platform that has already been updated. So I don't see a lot of AI being used in the mining space at the moment. I would say unless the mine goes on a journey of modernizing their digital landscape, it would be very difficult for that to penetrate really, really well. But I mean, obviously with us, it's something that we are constantly looking at, keeping our system maintained, keeping it up to date with current trends. So obviously if they're with us, they would get some of those tools.
How do you filter out the informational redundancies within these systems and what's needed?
It's difficult. It's very difficult. I think one of the challenges is the scale in a mining space.
Massive. Thousands of people.
Some of the small mines are 15,000 people, 15,000 staff.
Sure.
So when you need to migrate or modernize, you need to migrate everything that you have on one platform into another. It's a huge task. And the other challenge is this landscape is so rapid when it comes to change that even if it takes you a year to migrate all of your old systems to something that's more modern, there's a new system that's already come out. So it's it's really hard to keep up with the trends, which is why you really need to go cloud-based.
Yeah.
And being on a cloud-based infrastructure means that you can get updates to your software without having to do any of these migrations. And you need to be very careful as a mine, as really any organization. You need to be really careful around your choice on platforms.
Yeah.
Platforms that are not being updated regularly are something that you would need to look for. Platforms that are relatively rigid and structured and are old, let's say, is something that's not going to really help you when it comes to digitizing and modernizing. Yeah, you can be very careful with what you choose.
An interesting space that, just to change this topic slightly, is an interesting space that Mark and I are really focusing on at the moment is the contractor.
Right.
The contractor who's arriving at the mine, and that experience as well, in terms of, they also have to be recorded. They also have to be upskilled. They also have to be educated and part of this journey. But that contractor is not only a contractor for a mine A, but also a contractor for mine B, which is a different mining company. And the volume of contractors that actually work on the mines as well. Okay. So yes, we've got this huge sort of employment space in terms of employees, but we can't miss the fact that contractors are also critical. And how do we handle the processes and the everything related to a contractor?
Brilliant.
And I don't think there's enough focus of that specifically in how these processes are handled within a mining operation.
I think that's a brilliant thing to bring attention to, because that is such an important subject in terms of mining operations, right? And also standardizing safety requirements. You can't train our entire workforce and then have an external liability that could be problematic, if they're not held to the same standard, or if they're not informed, if that information isn't accessible, and easily so. I mean, there's nothing worse than going somewhere and the induction process is something slow and inefficient. I think learning in the mining space is predominantly about efficiencies. Would that be right in saying?
I wouldn't say it would predominantly be about efficiencies. It would be predominantly around compliance.
Data.
Efficiencies is something that I would say is becoming more and more important. Obviously, compliance is always the most important, but how can I make something more efficient? It has a bottom line impact. How can I save money on this by making it more efficient? Yeah,
I think data. When there is an incident on the mine, the first thing they want is data. And so how's that data pulling through? How are we keeping records? How are we versioning content? How are we ensuring that we are protecting the people who are actually working on the coalface? And more, it's how in some cases do we accommodate customization? We find, with no disrespect to the larger platforms, that it takes a lot longer for them to build custom features into their platforms. So it's about speed to market, and with the ever-changing environment that we're working with in South Africa, it's about how do we customize, how do we make this relevant, how do we absorb that strategic change. Right. And there again, it goes back to, is that relevant? Is it something that it's around collaboration, it's around discussions, it's about seeing, is this the right solution for our platform? But in addition to that, is it the right solution for the mine? How do we solution this? So as I mentioned, there's a lot of consulting that goes into what we actually do and offer as a service to our mining operations.
Brilliant. As a closing thought, can you each give me a question to walk away with in terms of a new area we should be looking at in mining?
So for me, it's something I've been thinking about a little while now. There's a big move at the moment, especially in our landscape, South African landscape, moving to contract mining. And contract mining is really, it's a different world. Obviously, as a as a mine, as a business, you have your own procedures and you need to train, but you can outsource really the entire mine to a contract miner or contract mining company. And I suppose my question would be, how do we persist learning across multiple different organizations when it comes to contract mining? If I do an induction here, or let's say it's not even an induction because that would be mine specific. If I do a standard operating procedure in one mine for a piece of equipment, surely I can persist that training through into another mine.
Totally.
And how do we bridge those gaps when it comes to individuals operating in different operations and in multiple mines? And how can we build a solution that makes all of that efficient from a contractor moving into different spaces and persist that training across? It happens in the education space all the time.
Yeah.
I don't have to redo my BSc because I've moved an organization.
Exactly.
I've already got my BSc.
Yeah.
Why do I need to redo my BSc now? Because I'm going to X mine and I've moved from Y mine. Yeah.
Qualifications based on my occupation rather than mine specific.
Natascha, what will be your closing thought and statement?
A key passion of mine has become women in mining.
Right.
And my question, and maybe you can take it further, is how do we empower women in mining?
Great.
We've got women underground now at the mine face, working as hard as men, key providers to families. Should it be something that's different? Do we differentiate them because they're women? Or what does that offering look like from a learning point of view?
Brilliant. That's such a great point. Oh, fantastic, guys. It's been so cool to have you on the show today. I think this has been super informative. It's been certainly energizing and eye-opening for me. And I hope for everyone who's tuned in that this has been something that fills you with answers, but also more questions. To find out more, to reach out to Mark and Natascha about some key thoughts that you might have, comments, and any suggestions that you may offer. This has been great having you guys on.
Thanks, KJ.
Thanks for helping us mind the gap.
Thank you.
Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.